Cuba, known for its cigars, music, and beautiful beaches. But did you know this small island has one of the most fascinating military histories in the world? From fighting off empires to surviving a nuclear crisis, Cuba's military story is one of revolution, resilience, and defiance. Let's dive into it. Colonial Wars and Independence, 1868 to 1898. Before Cuba was the independent nation we know today, it was under Spanish rule for over 400 years. But Cubans wanted freedom. In 1868, they launched the 10 Years' War, the first of many battles for independence. Although that war ended in failure, the fight didn't stop. Fast forward to 1895, and a legendary leader named José Martí sparked the final Cuban War of Independence. The Cuban rebels, known as Mambises, used guerrilla tactics to wear down Spanish forces. And then, something unexpected happened. The United States entered the war after the mysterious explosion of the USS Maine. By 1898, Spain was defeated and Cuba was finally free, or so they thought. United States, the US and Batista era, 1898 to 1959. After independence, Cuba came under heavy US influence. The US even occupied Cuba multiple times. In the 1930s, a powerful military figure named Fulgencio Batista took control. At first, he was a reformer, but by the 1950s, he had become a dictator backed by the US. The Cuban military at the time was modern but mostly used for internal security and keeping Batista in power. But then came the revolution that changed everything. Triangular flag, the Cuban Revolution, 1953 to 1959. Enter Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and the 26th of July movement. What started as a failed attack on a military barracks in 1953 became a full-scale guerrilla war. Castro's rebels, outnumbered and outgunned, hid in the Sierra Maestra Mountains, using hit-and-run tactics to weaken Batista's forces. By 1959, Batista fled the country and Castro took control. The Cuban military was no longer just an army, it became the Revolutionary Armed Forces, FAR, built to defend socialism at all costs. Radioactive, the Cold War and the Missile Crisis, 1960s to 1980s. Cuba's military became a major player during the Cold War. After aligning with the Soviet Union, Cuba received tanks, fighter jets, and even nuclear missiles. In 1962, the world came to the brink of nuclear war during the Cuban Missile Crisis when the US discovered Soviet nukes on the island. After a tense 13 days, the missiles were removed, but Cuba remained defiant. Cuban forces also fought abroad. Yes, abroad. Tens of thousands of Cuban soldiers were sent to Africa, helping communist allies in Angola and Ethiopia in the 1970s and 80s. Collision, modern-day Cuban military, 1990 present. After the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba lost its biggest ally. Its military budget shrank, but the country adapted. Today, Cuba has around 50,000 active troops and relies on homegrown defense strategies. Their military doctrine? Defend the island at all costs through asymmetric warfare, meaning if Cuba is invaded, it will turn into a massive guerrilla battlefield. Cuba's military history is one of revolution, survival, and strategy. From defeating empires to facing down nuclear war, this small island has stood against the odds time and time again. What do you think is the most fascinating part of Cuba's military history? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic military stories.